The Pulse Community Podcast is brought to you in part by Windsor Plywood in French Creek, specializing in hard-to-source interior and exterior home finishing products, including flooring, doors, and moldings, and exterior project materials such as yellow cedar. Windsor Plywood French Creek carries high-quality, responsibly sourced products and are committed to providing outstanding value and personalized, one-on-one service to all of our customers, homeowners, do-it-yourselfers, renovators, builders, designers, craftsmen, and contractors. Regardless of the type or size of your project, Windsor can help you bring your vision to life from start to finish. Let Windsor Plywood in French Creek help you with your renovation, new build, or building project. Visit them online or call 752-3122.
Here come Peter, here comes Dave. Oh, listen. Bringing stories, making waves, no missing. Spinning tales in the podcast cave, so sweet. Laughs and insights everywhere, what a treat. Peter and Dave, they're on the mics, all right. Join the ride, it's gonna feel just right.
It's time again for another look at life on Vancouver Island, with an emphasis on the center of the island, not too far north, not too far south, but just right. Goldilocks references aside, yes, we are right in the middle of paradise. With me is a man who is not too tall nor too loud, but just right. It's Peter McCully.
Great. Now I have an urge for a big bowl of piping hot porridge. Yes, we might be in the middle, but that doesn't make us average. This is beautiful BC, and we're coming to you from the Pulse Community Podcast World Headquarters. Not too big, not too small, but just right for myself and your co-host, Dave Graham.
And happy spring. You know, this is one of my favorite times of the year, along with summer, fall, and winter. It's always a joy to see blossoms in the trees and the daffodils and the other spring flowers. And then there's the sound of the birds. You know, one of my favorite sounds of all time is the robin's call. I'm instantly transported back to my childhood when I hear that sound. And it has me thinking, what sounds do other people find evocative? We'll get to that later. For now, let's tee up the show, Peter.
On this episode, science journalist Bob McDonald, best known as host of the science program Quirks and Quarks, he rose from a modest beginning to become a national figure. It makes for quite a story, and happily Bob has written it. His memoir is called Just Say Yes, and he'll be along for a chat.
I'm not afraid of AI. I'm not worried about a machine becoming so smart that it's going to take over the world and try to, Terminator style wipe out humanity. I'm not worried about that. I'm worried about the people that use AI and what they might do with it. But as far as a tool, it's incredibly powerful. There's also a joke. They asked the computer, is there a God? And the computer said, there is now. But I'm not worried about that.
Additionally, Duane Round is going to be joining us. Duane is one of those people. By that, I mean he is an exceptional community asset, having been involved in a list of community groups and causes too numerous to list here. Communities count on people like Duane in order to get things done and make things better. Duane is currently serving as president of the Parksville Community Center. We're going to drop into the center to talk about that, and we'll talk about the pop-up recycling events.
At first, we have no experience with this. It was pandemonium, and people have been saving material for 2-3 years. It was pretty busy, and in fact, I think we were delaying some traffic getting out of Parksville for a while. Since then, we've learned a lot, and we've improved the system. People come, they line up, they come in one gate, park, and drop their material off at the different sorting areas, and then they leave by a separate gate.
If you have a story to tell or a cause to promote, then maybe it's time for you to be on the Pulse Community Podcast for a chat. Contacting us is easy. The links are all available through our home website, thepulsecommunity.ca.
Another important bit of contact info is our contest email, which is contest@thepulsecommunity.ca. You might want to send us a quick note to get your name in for a draw for tickets to see Chilliwack. They are crisscrossing the country on their farewell tour. Actually, instead of crisscrossing, it's more like zigzagging. I feel for these guys. Rather than sweep from coast to coast, They are back and forth, Alberta to BC, to Ontario, to Alberta to BC, putting on the miles. On their last time out, they'll find their way to Parksville's magnificent outdoor theater, Saturday, July 12th. Send us an email with your name, phone number, where you live, and tell us your favorite Chilliwack song. We'll make the draw May 30th. Here's the address again, contest@thepulsecommunity.ca.
You can hear a conversation with Chilliwack's lead singer and songwriter, Bill Henderson, on episode 16 of the Pulse podcast. It was a great chat with Bill as he took us through the years and songwriting, which is his passion. Listen in to what he has to say about possible future gigs with his daughters Camille, who is a member of the West End Girls, and Saffron, who is also a singer and voice actress.
Well, Peter, I can no longer say you never take me out anywhere. The Natalie McMaster concert in Qualicum Beach was outstanding.
Was that your first Kaylee, Dave?
It was the first one like that.
Well, they're all like that. And we got to chat with Jean Daniel, whom we haven't seen for some time. He had a long and storied radio career, which included being part owner of the Beach and Lounge Radio in Parksville, Qualicum Beach.
Oh, yeah, it was a treat to see Gene again. We go back over 25 years to when I was among the starting lineup of announcers for when the Eagle and Courtney signed on the air for the first time. Gene has been facilitating entertainment events for more than 30 years on the island as G. Dan Productions. Thanks, Gene. Amazing show.
Hey, here's the next clue for the Tickle Trunk contest. Normally, in this virtual contest, we pick a spot and supply the clues, but this time, it's a thing, a flying thing. These creatures stop off in the Mid-Island area each year while on their way to breeding grounds in the far north. For another clue, look to our Skookum Kids Story series, The Mellow Submarine. Correct answers go into a draw for a $25 Thrifty Foods Smile Card. And please, include your name and where you live and send it to contest@thepulsecommunity.ca.
Ian Lindsay of Lindsay and Associates has played an active role in the local community since 1979. He has been with RE/MAX, Vancouver Island's most advanced real estate business network since 1996, marketing and selling residential, rural, strata, recreational, investment, and project development real estate. Ian has received several awards recognizing his exceptional community commitment locally, as well as awards for outstanding performance and achievement from both RE/MAX International and the Vancouver Island Real Estate Board. You'll find true real estate professionals at ianlindsay.ca.
Dave, I'd like to talk about the United States of Canada. Now, folks, don't send me emails about the United States of Canada. I said the United States of Canada, because everywhere that Dave and I go, we hear lots about Donald Trump and how he's dialed up patriotism in this country to what would appear to be an all-time high. And last week on the Pulse podcast, we listened to the local group, the Apollos, and their updated take on O Canada. If you have a tune of your own or would just like to direct us to one, please contact us. But I thought you'd like to take in Alan Frew of Glass Tiger's just released tune. That's all about us here in the Great White North. If you haven't heard it, enjoy it. Free to be, strong and free.
From the Isle of Vancouver to the Labrador Sea, one nation that lives strong and free, where I'm free to be me. From the songs of the prairies to the call of the ponds, heroes of times come and gone, but the memories go on and on and on. Oh, this is Canada's song. Oh, where my heart belongs. Where you're free to be a dreamer, free to be who you are, free to believe in your star, free to go far. Oh, this is Canada's song. Oh, where my heart belongs. dreamer, free to be who you are. Oh, this is Canada's song. Oh, where my heart belongs. Oh, we're free to be. Oh, we're strong and free. Oh, this is Canada's song. Oh, where I'm free to be, strong and free.
Alan Frew wishing us peace and harmony and celebrating Canada with his new song, Free to Be, Strong and Free. So what do you think of that? I'm thinking, first off, he looks pretty amazing for 69 years of age, and I certainly appreciate the message in the song. Feel free to share your thoughts. Now, earlier I was talking about the appeal for me of the sound of robins in the spring, and perhaps you have a favorite sound you'd like to mention. Well, comments, questions, constructive criticism, we welcome it all. Find the contact links at thepulsecommunity.ca.
Future guests include Cheryl Dill. The Parksville Beach Festival, commonly known as Beach Fest, returns to the community park in July and August. Cheryl's been president of the Beach Fest Society for years. We also hear from Vancouver Island blues musician David Gogo. He's got a new album called Yeah. In another future episode, we'll feature Mike Han, the man behind Lakefest and Sunfest here on the island.
Our requests for a visit with Ryan Reynolds continue to be ignored. That's okay. We'll keep trying. We have a guest ready right now. Marilyn, tell us who's in the green room.
In the green room is Duane Round, who is the chairman of the Parksville Community Center Society. The society is working with Recycle BC for pop-up recycling events this spring. Duane will also update what's happening at the Parksville Community Center.
Thanks for being on the podcast, Duane. Nice to see you again.
Hey, nice to see you, Dave, and congrats on you and Peter's collaboration on podcast.
Thank you. What motivated the decision to extend the partnership with Recycle BC until June of this year for these recycling events?
We've been doing this since May of 2023, and we want to continue doing it. All the volunteers that work at the pop-up, it's all volunteer operated. They're pretty passionate about the environment and doing our little part of keeping the material out of landfills and especially keeping it out of the environment. Especially microplastics is a huge problem today. It's in our air, it's in our water, it's in our bodies. And so any little bit we can do to help us is a little bit closer to getting that out of the system.
Mm-hmm. I have yet to attend one of these events. I keep planning it. My laundry room is full of items that my local collector won't take. So one of these days I'm going to make it. But in the meantime, can you describe what the pop-up event is like? Walk us through it.
At first, we have no experience with this. It was pandemonium, and people have been saving material for 2-3 years. It was pretty busy. And in fact, I think we were delaying some traffic getting out of Parksville for a while. Since then, we've learned a lot, and we've improved the system. People come, they line up. They come in one gate, park, and drop their material off at the different sorting areas, and then they leave by a separate gate.
Now, this is at 1080 Industrial Way in Parksville. For those who haven't participated before, any specific things they need to do in advance to be prepared for dropping their stuff off?
The more they can have their material sorted, speeds it up so that we can move people through quicker and in a better fashion. So the cardboard has to be cut into sizes smaller than 4x4 to fit in our super sacks. The jars need to be fairly clean, and we like to have the lids off of them. If you sort it into different bags, you can bring a shredded paper, but it's got to be in either a cardboard box or a paper bag so that it can go in and not contaminate the other paper stuff. Mm-hmm. But otherwise, the volunteers have really done a great job, and they have a really good system there. And I'm hearing all the time from people that are dropping off that how great our system is working.
Glad to hear it. You mentioned cardboard, shredded paper, glass. What other items will you accept?
We accept styrofoam, glass, paper, and cardboard, and plastic packaging. The packaging is paid for by the industry that produces it, so we can't collect products. So we can't take a glass vase. We can take a glass jar. It has to be packaging, because every time a manufacturer produces packaging, he pays so much cents on that package. It goes to Recycle BC, and they use that money to collect this stuff out in the community. And we're looking to expand into other products, and hopefully we can offer more services.
You talk about plastic packaging, and I can think of, 2 or 3 different kinds of plastic go into packaging. That must crop up as an issue.
When we first started in 2023, you used to have to keep your flexible plastic and crinkly plastic separate. So that was a real nightmare trying to sort that when people showed up with it. Then they developed a system where they can mix those products together and create the plastic pellets for recycling out of it. So we were really glad that they already had that set up by the time we started. So all the plastic can go together in the same sack.
Have you been able to measure the kind of impact that your efforts here during these pop-up events have on the environment and saving stuff from landfills? Do you have any numbers?
Yeah, we get a report at the end of every year from Recycle BC on the volume. They do the volume by weight. We average about 70 super sacks per event. Super sack is 4 by 4 by 4. So we average about 70 of those, plus plastic liner bags of styrofoam, which we usually average about 10 or 12 of those. The volumes for 2023, which was a shorter year, only from May to December, we collected 47,354 kilograms of material, which is 104,000 pounds, or 47.3 tons.
Wow.
In 2024, which we had a full year of collection, we collected 83,326 kilograms, which is 183,500 pounds, or 91.7 tons of material kept out of the landfills.
How many people do you engage to make this happen?
With our contract with Recycle BC, we're responsible to have a minimum of 6 people. We never know how busy it's going to be. Sometimes it's really busy, sometimes it's not as busy. We generally have about 12 people. We take turns. We have a morning shift and an afternoon shift. We have people directing traffic. We have people at each station directing people and making sure that there's no contamination, and then putting the product into storage.
Is there much training involved? Could I just walk in off the street one day and say, hey, I want to help out?
You could walk in there and we would have you trained in about 3 minutes flat, Dave, and we'd be more than glad to have you. We even have the girl guides help us for collections down there. So we have young girls, 12, 13, 14, and they're able to catch on pretty good, and we leave them in charge of some of the stations.
Any plans you can speak of in terms of enhancing the services currently being offered?
The reason we only have a 6-month contract for 2025 is because us and Recycle BC want to move towards a more traditional depot. So that would mean being open more days, expanding the hours. That would also give us the opportunity to add other collectible items. We could start collecting metal. We could get a contract with Product Care BC for collecting light bulbs and paint, and even maybe collecting pop bottles. We're working on that right now. We have to June to submit a proposal to Recycle BC. We're working on putting that proposal together.
Just prior to our sitting down to this conversation, you graciously gave me a tour of the Parksville Community Center. Magnificent place to see and so much community engagement involved. How busy would you say you are right now?
We're getting very busy, Dave. We got so many different groups meeting here now on a regular basis, like the Rotary, Weight Watchers, Grandmothers to Grandmothers, the PQ Flyers. We've got different groups like the RDN, Island Health. Probus meets here regular. We have a church meeting here. A lot of different groups like MS, CNIB have their meetings here. We have lots of different organizations holding their AGMs here. Last year, we were the provincial election office for BC. We had quite a bit of space available for them for 3 months. We're now going to be hosting Elections Canada when the election is called for them, and we're going to be providing space for them. So we've got one large meeting room, 3 medium-sized meeting rooms. We got small offices we rent out. We got a boardroom. We got a kitchen that's been certified by VHA so we can prepare and serve food to the public. We've got a lot to offer here, and we offer it by the hour, daily, weekly, or monthly.
Oh, perfect. And people can go to a website for more information.
We still have the old Parksville Community Center website. So you can go on there. It's got a map of the facility. You can click on the rooms. It'll open up the size of it and the cost. You can book a room right through the website. Just fill out the form, submit it to our booking coordinator, and she'll set you up with the room. I also wanted to tell you that we also have a 32-space childcare center running on the facility, separate from us. We provide the space for them. We've got Elder College here now, meeting on a regular basis. Those are some of the things that we're doing. I just want to thank you for coming today, Dave. And I also want to give a big shout out to all our great volunteers that make this facility operate. It's completely operated by volunteers. I've been told that we're maybe the only facility in British Columbia that operates a community center with volunteers and gets no local government support.
Well done. Thanks again, sir.
Thank you very much. Good to see you, Dave.
Duane Round. He was Parksville's Citizen of the Year in 2014, and he's currently president of the Parksville Community Center. They facilitate those pop-up recycling events. It's a free service. They'll take your flexible plastic packaging, glass, foam, cardboard, paper.
Packaging and recycling. And it's all good stuff, but it's all very adult. Well, as it happens, we also cater to the kids with our Skookum Kid Stories, delightful original stories, including one about a boy named Peter and his pet Eskimo dog Gracie. In an upcoming episode, they head to the Qualicum Beach Vet Clinic for a checkup. Follow along with stories of Peter and Gracie as narrated by Peter McCully.
And then there's Captain Dave and his stories of adventure aboard the Mellow Submarine. This week, it's Captain Dave and the Secret of the Nanaimo Bar. You'll find all of our Skookum Kid Stories on thepulsecommunity.ca, also at skookumkids.com, Apple, Spotify, iHeart, Amazon, and YouTube. If you're interested in joining our growing family of sponsors for the Pulse Community and Skookum Kid Stories podcasts, let us know. Just email me, Peter, at thepulsecommunity.ca.
The Pulse Community Podcast is brought to you in part by Windsor Plywood in French Creek, specializing in hard-to-source interior and exterior home finishing products, including flooring, doors and moldings, and exterior project materials such as yellow cedar. Windsor Plywood French Creek carries high-quality, responsibly sourced products and are committed to providing outstanding value and personalized, one-on-one service to all of our customers, homeowners, do-it-yourselfers, renovators, builders, designers, craftsmen, and contractors. Regardless of the type or size of your project, Windsor can help you bring your vision to life from start to finish. Let Windsor Plywood in French Creek help you with your renovation, new build, or building project. Visit them online or call 752-3122.
Our thanks to Windsor Plywood for their support of the Pulse Community Podcast. This is the program focused on mid-Vancouver Island, but open to interesting stories from all over. That includes our next guest, Marilyn.
In the green room is Bob McDonald, an author and science journalist and a member of the Order of Canada. He'll talk about his new book, Just Say Yes, which is a memoir, and his time as the host of Quirks and Quarks.
Thanks for joining us today, Bob.
My pleasure, Peter.
I'm reasonably sure that every one of our listeners knows somebody named Bob McDonald somewhere, but there's only one who's been working as a science journalist and an author for more than 30 years, most notably as host of Quirks and Quarks.
Well, actually, it's now more than 50 years. I started communicating science to the public in 1973. So that was my 50th anniversary, was 2023. Talk about feeling old.
You've recently written a memoir entitled Just Say Yes, which we will dive into. But I wanted to know where the love of science began for Bob McDonald.
Oh, it began when I was a kid growing up in Orillia, which is a small town north of Toronto and at the beginning of the Lake District. The local newspaper had a drawing of the Earth with a circle around it and a little ball in that circle. And it said, Russians put up first artificial moon. And it was Sputnik, the first satellite. I was totally engrossed by that. I watched the entire space program. As a kid, I knew the names of all the astronauts and Yuri Gagarin, of course, the first person in space. I watched all the moon landings, not just the first one. It's always excited me ever since I was a kid, and it's been a supreme privilege to be both a live presenter and a journalist talking about science that I've been watching ever since I was young.
There's some really great stories and lessons in the book, I might add. The first lesson would be to travel the world if you get a chance at all. How did that happen for you?
Oh, I've always been an explorer. Home for me was an outdoor experience. My mother's mantra was, get out of the house, don't bother me. Get out of the house and go play. And you can do that in a small town. So I was always out playing with friends. And then when I got a bicycle, I just started wandering on my own, just down streets I'd never been before. And then I found it really exciting to go somewhere new. Then I got into motorcycles and started roaming around North America. I still do that. I still drive motorcycles now. And it's a wonderful way to explore. An opportunity came along to see an eclipse of the sun in Africa in 1980. I wanted to see that. I'd chased eclipses before, and this was a great idea to go to Africa. I'd never been there, to the Serengeti and all of that. And I thought, kind of dumb to go halfway around the world and come back the same way. So I asked the guy who was organizing the trip, what would it take to come home the long way? He said, well, you choose the cities you want to go to, and I'll get you a ticket, and it'll have all the flights on it, but no dates. So you can just go into that airline, whatever city you're in, and give them that ticket, say, I'd like to be on the next flight, and they'll put you on it. I thought, okay, where do I want to go? I took a globe of the earth. I was living in Toronto at the time, so I put one finger on Toronto, the other finger on the other side, and I just turned it over, like what's directly underneath. And it turns out it's the Indian Ocean. So I thought, oh, India. And then just north of that is Nepal. Oh, yeah, I've always wanted to see the Himalayas. And I connected the dots. And then I took half a year and I went all the way around the world by myself. It was the greatest thing I've ever done. So I still love to travel. It's the best education you can get.
Was half a year enough?
No, there's more earth to see than the time you can. I was worried that people would forget me because at the time I was a freelance journalist. So I didn't have a regular job and I thought they'd forget. And the funny thing was, when I came back, they said, oh, are you back already? You just left. If I could have taken more, I would.
And with that travel comes some interesting stories. Perhaps you could explain to our listeners how a Frisbee works or might not work.
A Frisbee is a gyroscopically stabilized dynamic lifting body, if you want to know its true definition. I found that above 10,000 feet, it doesn't work. I carried a Frisbee with me on my journeys around the world as a great icebreaker, because wherever I went, if I just took it out and if there were kids around and I tossed it to them, they knew how to use it and they would toss it back. And it was a great way to meet strangers. But when I was in the Himalayas and took a trek up to the snow line, which is way, way up there, it's above 10,000 feet. Up there, the Frisbee wouldn't fly. And you'd throw it and the air was so thin that it would just drop like a brick. But I was in this one Nepalese village tossing it around with some kids, and there were some older folks standing there, and they thought it was the funniest thing they'd ever seen. They'd never seen one, and they were just dying laughing every time I threw it. So I tossed it to one of them, and it didn't fly very well. He picked it up, and I said, come on, throw it back. So he didn't know how to spin it, so he just tossed it, and it flopped around in the air and fell at my feet. Brought the house down. The greatest icebreaker I've ever had. But I was an instant hit with the community.
And air travel has changed when it comes to where you're going and what you can carry on board, like you learned when you were on a plane in Australia.
I arrived in Australia with a huge machete that I bought from a kid that just appeared out of the woods. He was a traditional Nepalese kid in traditional garb, and he had this big machete tucked into his waistband. It's about half a meter long, and it's got a curved blade. I bought it from him, and he was happy to sell it to me. And when I arrived in Australia, I had this thing in my backpack, and I didn't want to hide it. I just showed it to the Australian customs guy, which was this big, beefy guy in shorts. And I handed it to him, and he took it out of the scabbard, and he looked at it, and he says, nice knife, gonna need that. Then he handed it back to me. Very different times today.
Yes. When I watch TV shows that show historic buildings, especially with Europe, old Europe, Italy and Greece in particular, I'm always fascinated at how well the construction has held up and lasted. And you had a chance to tour a very significant home in Florence.
I was in Galileo's home. That was astounding. It's still there. It's a house with a brick wall around it, and on the wall it says Galileo. And it was actually occupied by other people after he died, but it's been taken over by the country now and turned into a museum. And when I was there, it hadn't quite opened to the public yet. They were still renovating it, but they let me come inside and wander around. Here I was in Galileo's home. I mean, he's one of my science heroes because he believed, as Copernicus did ahead of him, that the Earth went around the sun. But the Pope at the time, who was actually an amateur astronomer, did not believe that. And you don't tell the Pope that he's wrong. As we all know, Galileo was house arrested for a good part of his life. So there I was in his kitchen, in his bedroom, out on the porch, looking over. he continued to teach by inviting university students to come visit him. And that's how his work continued on. He believed in young people because they're the future. And I've dedicated a good part of my career to teaching young people because they get it. And we have to have a scientifically literate society. So it was quite a privilege to be in his actual home. I don't know if any osmosis came through the walls into me, but it was amazing to be in historic sites like that. There was another doorway that I was in, Ephesus, which is in Turkey on the Mediterranean. They have a library there that was the second largest compared to the Great Library of Alexandria. They have the facade of it still standing, this stone facade, the front portico with a doorway that you can step through. Plato, Aristotle went through those doors. And I stood in that doorway thinking that, wow, these great minds went through here so many centuries ago. And it's profound. That's one of the things I love about travel is to see the real places where historic figures that you studied actually went. One of the things I've learned from my world travelers is that people are generally good. What we see on the news is a small minority of people who are fighting, but people who live their everyday lives. I was taken into so many homes at the end of a day when hitchhiking, they say, come on, we'll put you up for the night. And I went through the entire spectrum of society from farms to, I was put up by a 4-star general one night. And everybody, it was just great. And people are just generally good. And it reinforced my faith in humanity.
Bob, tell me where the title of the book came from. Just Say Yes.
That came out of constant requests that I'm getting where people say, what's your background? Where did you get your PhD or whatever? When I tell them that I'm actually a university dropout, former construction worker and truck driver, they go, what? How did you get the host Quirks and Quarks? How did you get to be on the National and all that stuff? So that's why I wrote the book, is to tell my story. But I did find out that when I thought back on it, it's because I said yes to opportunities that were presented to me by friends, by family, by coworkers, mentors, who said, hey, why don't you try this? You'd be good at that. For some reason, I said yes to those opportunities. The first one came from my girlfriend who had a job at the Ontario Science Centre. She said, hey, you should try here. You'd be good. And so I drove my truck to the Science Center and talked the guy's ear off. I said, I'd love to work here. This is great. I love science. I did some theater in school. This is like theater and science together. And he hired me on the spot just on enthusiasm. And it happened again, working with the CBC, asked to do documentaries or asked to host kids shows, or American producers called me up, said, would you like to do some stuff for us? And every time I said yes, even though I wasn't actually qualified, I found that there are 3 points that you need to do. One is to say yes. It'll change your life, which it did mine. 2, after you say yes, you'll get scared because you go, oh my God, I've never done this. What have I done? I can't do this. And I found the way to beat that is to ask for help. Ask, what's the first thing I need to do? Then just do that. Then once you do that first thing, you'll see the next one. And then just keep stepping your way through it. The 3rd point is to finish it. Finish what you start. Forget about trying to be the best in the world. There's always someone better than you, but just get it done. And the people who are paying you really appreciate you coming in on deadline day. Those have been my philosophies, and for some reason, it's led me to where I am today.
You recently celebrated 30 years as the host of Quirks and Quarks, and I'm sure you have a few standout highlights you'd like to pass along to our listeners.
Oh, yeah, that was a remarkable night. And we went back to the Ontario Science Centre, which unfortunately no longer exists, where I started my whole career. We went back there, and it was a wonderful night. I was actually worried that it was going to be a roast. I thought everybody was going to, tear me apart and make fun of me all night, but they didn't. It was a wonderful tribute. We had regular scientists who've been on the show sort of saying, hey, congratulations, and then asking me questions. One of the highlights was when Chris Hadfield, our Canadian astronaut, whom I've known since 1995, I went to Russia with him when he was training to go up on his first flight. He and I played guitar together. He let me play in his astronaut band one time. I'm not good, but it was fun. He asked me, would you go to Mars? Because I asked him that. I said, would you go to Mars? He said, yeah, in a heartbeat. So he asked me that same question. I thought about it and I said, I used to want to go to Mars. I've already picked all my vacation spots. There's great skiing at the North Pole if we could get there. And there's a huge canyon that makes the Grand Canyon look like a crack in the sidewalk. I'd love to see all that. But now that I've seen it through the eyes of robots that have been there and shown us that, yes, it's neat, it's interesting, but it's cold, it's dry, there's no oxygen, you'd have to wear a spacesuit all the time. It's a really hard place to live. I've come to really like planet Earth. I think I'd rather explore this one myself and see the other planets virtually through the eyes of the robots.
You mentioned Chris Hadfield. I chatted with Dr. Robert Thirsk, who was on the International Space Station for 6 months or more.
Yep.
And he was telling me about going to live in Moscow to learn Russian so he could go up on the International Space Station. When you mentioned Chris Hadfield, he went to Russia in the Mir space station, and you followed him there.
Yes, it was wonderful. This was a case where I made an opportunity happen. I heard about Chris doing this, and I've always wanted to see the Russian side of the space program. We'd always see the American side over here in North America. I went to the documentary unit at CBC for the National. I knew the guy who was the head of it. I'd met him before. And I just stood in the doorway and I said, Daniel, there's a new Canadian astronaut called Chris Hadfield who's going to fly on an American space shuttle and go up to a Russian space station. He's training in Russia right now. We need to go and do a documentary and I need to do it for you. And he went, never heard of the guy. I said, look, this is a big story. He said, okay, write up a one-pager. I'll send it up to management. So I wrote it up in one page. The next thing I know, I'm on a flight to Moscow. Yes, I followed Chris around. And they still do, because I was back there just a few years ago, they have a full-size mock-up of the Mir space station in this big building, just like the Americans have a full-size mock-up of the International Space Station in Houston. Chris took me on a tour of the Mir space station. We went inside all these different modules, and he showed me what they're all alike, and it was really great. And then we came to the end. There's a hatch that went out to outer space. And he says, and that's the next thing I want to do. I want to go out and do a spacewalk, which is exactly what he did on his next mission to space. He did a spacewalk. It's been a real pleasure to see Chris. As we were walking through Red Square in Moscow, I said, I can't believe I'm talking to a Canadian fighter pilot who's going up to a Russian space station. He said, yeah, especially since I had Russian bombers in the gun sights of my F-18 when I was a fighter pilot.
Now, the big question, who's the better singer, you or Chris Hadfield?
Oh, he's way better. He's way better. But we have fun together, and we know a lot of the same old songs, and we like to play. I also play with his brother, Dave, who is an Air Canada pilot, and he has a band as well. So we all get together and jam once in a while. The last time Chris was here, I invited him to my boat, and we made noise down below in my cabin so nobody could hear us.
Speaking of your boat, I know you're an avid motorcyclist, as I was, and a sailor. Your book talks about a few sailing stories. My favorite was your 48-foot sailboat being dwarfed by the Queen Mary II.
That was in 1992 when New York City was hosting a tall ship parade to celebrate the 500th anniversary of Columbus. And they had designated anchorages along the sides of the Hudson River where visitors could watch this tall ship parade. And tall ships from around the world came and they were parading up the Hudson. And one of the anchorages was at the Statue of Liberty. There's a shallow spot beside the Statue of Liberty and Ellis Island where all the immigrants came. That's where I anchored. I had the whole Manhattan skyline in front of me, sitting on my boat. After this parade was over, we could leave and we could just motor around because all these tall ships went to the jetties on Manhattan. And one of the boats there was the Queen Mary II. She was leaving just as I came by. It was so big that the top of my mast barely reached, I think, the second row of the portholes on her hull. I was just looking up at this monster, beautiful black, red, and white ocean liner. The ocean liners are different from the cruise ships. The cruise ships are as tall as possible because they want to get as many people on them. But the ocean liners, they're built for speed. They're the greyhounds of the sea. So they're lower down, they have more pointy bows, and they race across the Atlantic Ocean. So they have really, really beautiful lines. When they pulled her out by tug, she seemed to take up the entire Hudson River when she was sitting sideways in it. And then they had to turn her around and get her pointed down. And I'm watching all this. And at the end, when they finally get her into position and all the tugboats pull away, she gave a blast of her horn. And it was the deepest low note, like this, like, I'm here, hello. It was just humbling. It was beautiful. There I am in my little boat beside her, watching her go by.
I was going to tell you my story about my 17-foot runabout being dwarfed by Jimmy Patterson's yacht in Salt Spring, but there's really no comparison with the Queen Mary II. What's it like to sit and chat with 4 Nobel Prize winners, Bob?
Well, that was a pinch me moment in my history at Quirks and Quarks. It was 1999, and we were preparing for the millennium. Just by coincidence, one of the Canadian Nobel laureates, Dr. Polanyi from the University of Toronto, invited 6 other people who had won the Nobel Prize to come to Toronto for a conference. We intercepted them on the way to a banquet, and they agreed to come into my studio and talk to me about their thoughts on what the new millennium might bring. So here I am sitting in my studio, and I have 6 gentlemen. Unfortunately, there were no women at that time, but they're all in tuxedos. And they're all sitting around the store, and each one of them had won the Nobel Prize in different areas of science. And they're talking to me. And it was one like, how did I get here? How did this happen? When I really appreciated what I do for a living, that I get to talk to people around the world. And it's always exciting for me whenever the Nobel Prizes come out, I get to talk to the winners. It's such a privilege to be host of Quirks and Quarks and talk to some of the smartest people on the planet. So that was a high point for me in my career.
Bob, I did want to ask you about artificial intelligence. It's becoming a part of our everyday lives. I know you've covered stories on it. Could you talk about some of the more positive uses of AI that you've seen? We tend to hear about some of the more negative aspects, but there must be some positive uses you've run across.
Well, science was one of the first areas to embrace artificial intelligence because science deals with large quantities of data, and artificial intelligence programs are able to go through that and see things that people don't. They can go through it much more quickly, so do in a matter of hours what might take days or weeks for people to do, and see patterns that people don't recognize. It's really great as a tool. It's a tool in medicine. It allows physicians to help diagnose conditions. Somebody comes in and says, I have a headache. What are all the possible conditions that might lead to a headache or whatever? So it's been a great tool, and it will continue to be a great tool in many different ways in finance or what else. I think we're going to keep it as that. The difficulties are, where do we put the boundaries around it so that it's not misused, so that people don't try to pretend that there's something they're not. It's an issue in universities right now where students are using AI to write essays. Thankfully, there are counter programs that help professors spot them so that they can see that this was not written by the student. It was done by AI. You know, it's a powerful tool. Anytime a powerful tool comes along, we have to say, how is it going to be used? It can be used for good or it can be used for evil. We did the same thing with nuclear weapons. You know, they were powerful tools, but we put boundaries around those and said, we're just not going to use those. And hopefully no one will go outside those boundaries. So I'm not afraid of AI. I'm not worried about a machine becoming so smart that it's going to take over the world and try to, Terminator style wipe out humanity. I'm not worried about that. I'm worried about the people that use AI and what they might do with it. But as far as a tool, it's incredibly powerful. There's also a joke. They asked the computer, is there a God? And the computer said, there is now. But I'm not worried about that.
The book is Just Say Yes. Bob, thanks for your time today. I enjoyed the book and enjoyed our time together.
Pleasure talking to you, Peter.
Bob McDonald and a success story in the form of a memoir. We all love a story where the main character must face disadvantage and adversity, and they persevere and ultimately succeed and become a nationally recognized science journalist. We love those stories. But seriously, we like stories that inspire, and Just Say Yes certainly fits that description.
The Pulse Community Podcast is at its best when we have two-way communication, and we're interested in hearing from you. Click on the link labeled Speak to Us, and you may literally do so. We also accept text and email, and on occasion, we actually get out in public and seek your opinions. Be on the lookout for the Peter and Dave Roadshow as we connect with you, the Pulse community, at various locations in the weeks to come.
Peter, I have a suggestion.
Yes, Dave.
Do you remember last week when I was talking about how impressed I was by the ability of the French Creek Waste Treatment Facility to keep a lid on the smells?
Yes, I do.
Construction at the site seems to have caused a change in that status. By that, I mean the lid is completely off, and maybe someone dropped it and it broke. I don't know, but it is not good. The area around the treatment site lately is full of it. I mean, the smell, that is. I mean, it's so bad. Really, but I could go on.
Okay, Dave, point made. Next time we head out to talk to people, it won't be near the waste treatment facility. How about we head down to the cafeteria and see what special Mabel has for us?
Oof, that's a hard pivot from the smell of that to food. But yeah, okay, I'm game. Let's go.
Here come Peter, here comes Dave. Oh, listen. Bringing stories, making waves. No missing. Spinning tales in the podcast cave. So sweet. Laughs and insights everywhere. What a treat.